Members of the board, I am presenting this piece of work paper on flood and the effect they have on our environment, and not just the environment, but also on businesses and our communities. I ask that you have patience as I go through this slide to explain and make my presentation. Like I said, Trident University. My name is Musa A. Dassama, and I'm talking about the discussion on Module 4 SLP. And I'll move to the next slide. The overview of method in business research. We've talked about the overview. There are methods, there are strategies, way of collecting information and gathering information, to qualitative research method and quantitative research method. And at this point, I'm working on my research paper on this flood, because in the United States today, we have so much problems with flood every year, flood damages, and how is this impacting our community, and how is it affecting our businesses and our economy. Can flood cause more harm than good to the environment and lead to economic disaster? This is what I want to know. And if so, how can we address the issue? There are positive and negative in everything that we discuss here. The positive side of it, we will get to know. The negative is always seen, because when flood occur, you see a lot of flooding, people lose their houses, the vehicles, and other things that are really important to them. The terminal learning objective here is prioritizing flood protection. What are we going to do, or what can I recommend to this board on flood protection? We look at the average rainfall. There are variables. Observing the average rainfall. There are some areas that receive a high amount of rainfall, and there are other areas that receive minimum amount of rainfall. So all of these come together to determine the average rainfall of a special or environment or community or setting or region. The geographic location also impact, like we saw the story of New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina, that the city is below the sea level. So if the levee breaks, what happened? The water rushes into the city and causes devastation and the loss of lives. Urban development. We talk about urban development. Let's look at urban development. Communities are expanding every day. Communities are getting bigger and larger. Housing accommodations being built to accommodate the influx of urban migration. So now we have a problem where if a levee was set up for maybe a small community, that levee now have to be used to accommodate 3 times the regular size. We talk about waterways and drainages. Waterways sometimes are smaller because culverts that are built for the small communities can no longer accommodate the high flow of personnel or people that live in that area. So this could also be another effect. We talk about levee. The river basins can overflow. Like some say in a recent story came out about Hurricane Florence. It said some riverbeds were always dry, and nowadays we're so surprised to see how it got flooded. So all of these need to be taken into consideration. The characteristics of the land. How is the land structured? Is it on a slope? Is it on a highland? Is the area below sea level? All of these factor in when considering flood protection or prioritizing flood protection. The consequences of flood. We talk about the protection. How can we prevent it? These are areas that I've identified that need to be addressed. So now we also look at the consequences of flooding. What happened? It degrades the aquatic habitat. All of the animals and stuff, wildlife, they all now have to move and migrate because of the flood into areas that they are not supposed to be. Pollution. We encounter this whenever there is a flood. Hurricane Harvey, when Hurricane Harvey occurred in Houston area, the pollution was bad to the point where people had to go and do cleaning to get rid of dead animals, the sewage water that was also running into the water system, causing a lot of devastation. The spread of harmful chemicals. We're also seeing that. Let's look at the Fukushima Dam. When it was destroyed by flooding in Japan, the chemicals were all over and caused a lot of problem for Japan to clean up. Loss of life. This is one of the most common things that we see. Whenever flood occur in areas, we feel for the elderly and the younger generation, the young kids. Sometimes babies, they become victim of this flooding because they can't get out and they cannot move on their own. Destruction of communities. Communities get torn apart. People separated, children separated from their fathers, fathers separated from mothers, and just tear up the entire community. The displacement of people, and there are so many other factors that we can take into consideration when discussing the consequences of flooding. Flooding may have, although the consequences might outweigh the good, but there are some benefits that also come with this flooding. The most important benefit of flood can be related to agricultural process. When dry land, highland, when water occur, flooding occur, it brings down sometimes the rich soil into the river basin, allowing the soil to become fertile and allow agricultural process. Farmers also use the river water from the river basins to perform irrigation process in order to grow their crops. It also brings down deposit of minerals and other resources that come along in flooding. Let's look at the aftermath. Loss of lives, illness and injuries, lack of safe drinking water, sewage disposals, damage of gas lines, lack of electricity, and exposure to wildlife. Are there any preventive measures? We talk about the protection, but we can also look at the preventive measure. Are there any preventive measure? Yes, there are preventive measures. Although the preventive measure may not outweigh the strength of nature, but there are actions that can be put into place in order to minimize the infrastructural damages, to minimize the loss of lives, and protect the environment. How can that be done? Building natural barriers along the coastal plains. Another way is quality inspection of the levees, flood zone awareness programs, affordable flood insurance for homeowners or those that live in flood zones, a semi-annual inspection of emergency management plans, a quarterly joint training for responders at all levels. And we can also talk about community recovery plan. These are some of the important factors that we should be considering when looking at this research paper. For this, we also have references at the end, just for those who want to take the time to go through some of this. and see what exactly I'm talking about, we can go ahead and look at these references and make your decision. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.